you so much for having me, Chloe. It's really exciting to be here. So as Chloe mentioned, my name is Jennifer Cook. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And today we're going to talk a bit about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but especially focusing on teaching others how to stay safe online. So just a bit about us, the National Cybersecurity Alliance is a nonprofit organization, and it's our mission to empower a more secure, interconnected world. We want to make sure everyone has access to free, easy to understand materials that help them stay safe online and learn about cybersecurity, as well as cybersecurity careers and opportunities. We have hundreds of these resources on our website called staysafeonline.org. And we run a number of programs throughout the year. We co-lead Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We also have Data Privacy Week every January. We have an HBCU career program where we have mentorship and career fair programs for HBCU schools and students. And we have programs for small business owners, as well as a number of initiatives we do throughout the year to reach everyone, kids, teens, parents, seniors, anyone that uses technology, really. So held every October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month is a collaborative effort between government and industry to raise awareness about the importance of cybersecurity, and again, seeking to ensure that everyone has the resources they need and the education they need to be safer and more secure online. Since its launch in 2004, our lives have moved more and more, online into the virtual realm. And Cybersecurity Awareness Month we see as an opportunity for the cybersecurity community to come together around unified messaging and educate others about online safety and the role that cybersecurity plays in keeping them, their family, and their organizations safe and secure year-round. So we co-lead Cybersecurity Awareness Month with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and work closely with our public sector and private sector partners at all levels to create messaging and engage their employees, customers, and communities. So this year, we approached Cybersecurity Awareness Month with the following words in mind. We wanted our messaging to be positive, approachable, simple, and back to basics. So this is something that we at the National Cybersecurity Alliance focus on year-round, but our strategy for October this year was to communicate to the general public that practicing cybersecurity, even the basics, is simple to do and is actually really effective against cybercrime. We want to leave our audience feeling empowered that they can do something to keep themselves secure. Cybersecurity is a serious topic and it can be a scary topic for many, but just because it's important, that doesn't mean we have to use fear when talking about it. We find that people are much more receptive to positivity rather than negativity. We also want to be approachable and friendly in the way we talk about cybersecurity, so our advice doesn't sound too scary. We want people to stay safe, not because, we tell them so, but because they're motivated to do so, because it's going to help protect themselves and their families. We look to keep it simple, avoiding jargon or words that only an expert would know. And then going back to basics, when it comes to the general public, many people still don't take the simple steps that are necessary to staying safe online. So if you've participated in Cybersecurity Awareness Month in the past, you might remember we had weekly themes, but instead this October, we're not using weekly themes. We're instead promoting behavior change through 4 basic tips that we're talking about all month long. So the overarching theme this year, See Yourself in Cyber, stresses the importance of the people part of cybersecurity and highlights the role that everybody plays in cybersecurity, as well as encouraging people to consider seeing themselves in a cybersecurity career. Again, we're focusing on this idea of simplicity and that this stuff is easy. And as for the security professionals on the line, we know that your jobs certainly aren't easy, but we want people who aren't in cybersecurity to understand that this stuff doesn't have to be overwhelming and that there are a few quick steps that they can take to keep themselves much more secure, including enabling multi-factor authentication, using strong passwords and a password manager, updating their software, and recognizing and reporting phishing. So we are talking a lot about people feeling frustrated or intimidated, and I want to cover this first before talking about our tips for teaching others how to stay safe online, because I think it's important to level set, to understand, when we're reaching out to people, when we're having conversations about online safety, where, the general public is at in their perception of cybersecurity. So how do we know people have these feelings? We recently surveyed 3,000 people across the US, the UK, and Canada, ages 18 through retirement age. And we asked them about how they feel about cybersecurity and certain cybersecurity behaviors. And these results revealed a lot of insights to us about the public's attitudes and beliefs about security. So we asked them about the behaviors I just mentioned for Cybersecurity Awareness Month: passwords, multi-factor authentication, installing updates, phishing, as well as backing up data. And I'm going to run through some of our findings from this report. On this slide, this is the behavioral science model known as COMBI. And what this says is that you need 3 things: capability, motivation, and opportunity before you exhibit a behavior. So, for example, you could be motivated to do something, but not have the knowledge or the capability of how to do it. It takes all 3 of these things to work before we do something. And this is hard. And if it was easy, we would all have the best habits. We'd all be working out 5 days a week and eating healthy, but it doesn't work that way. I think that motivation piece is especially hard, and especially when it comes to adopting cybersecurity behaviors. I think this quote kind of highlights that. Seth Godin is an expert on advertising and marketing, and he talks about how complex we are as humans. This quote says, "Facts don't change people's behavior, emotion changes people's behavior." In our research, we have been finding that motivation is a problem in cybersecurity. Only a quarter of the people we surveyed felt motivated to take action when it comes to cybersecurity behaviors. And I'll show you some of those other insights. So we asked people how they feel about a number of statements. We asked, starting with this one, how do you feel about the statement, "I prioritize staying secure online"? So the vast majority of people strongly agree with the statement. They say they prioritize staying safe online, which is great. It was no surprise to us. But it's really great to see that this is something that people do care about. We also asked how they feel about this statement: "Staying secure online is under my control." So it seems like people generally agree and believe that they can have an effect on their own security. But the results there weren't as many strongly agree results as the last one about prioritizing cybersecurity. And a lot of people were more neutral about it, which is a problem. We also asked how many people find cybersecurity intimidating. So most people here felt neutral, but still a lot of people agreed or strongly agreed that they find cybersecurity intimidating. And this isn't good for us as an industry when we're trying to keep people safe. If you find something intimidating, your response is usually to avoid it. And these results were actually identical to the results we got from this report last year. And we also asked about feelings of frustration. Do people find staying secure frustrating? And 46% said, yes, they agree. They find staying secure online frustrating. Frustration is also certainly not a good motivator. But with all this, it's important to remember that people do worry about falling victim to cybercrime. People do care. You can see people are responded in our report. They are incredibly worried about it. I think people have a lot of anxiety over cybercrime as well. And I'm sharing all this because I think in the security world, it can be easy to lose sight of how the public feels about cybersecurity and why they're not doing the things that we are asking them to do. So maybe we see this in our own organizations. If you're trying to get employees to turn on MFA or use a company VPN, a lot of these feelings are getting in the way. So it's important to remember that people do care. They do care about staying safe online, but there are these, negative feelings getting in the way. And I want to wrap up this overview of our survey results on a positive note. We asked people, what, if any, security behaviors have you changed as a result of training? So we asked them to check all that apply. MFA, recognizing phishing, started saving passwords in a password manager or browser, using strong, unique passwords, regularly installing updates, backing up their data, or we asked if they didn't change any behavior as well. And the results were really encouraging. Only 8% of people we surveyed did nothing. They didn't make any change. So that means the vast majority of people received a cybersecurity training and changed their behavior in some way. And that's fantastic because, again, doing something, changing your behavior, changing your habits based on knowledge is very hard. How many of you have been to a conference or a seminar where you learn a ton and get lots of great ideas to implement, and then you go back to your day-to-day and don't do any of it? It's really hard to do. But I think we should be encouraged to see that cybersecurity training is helping the vast majority of people, which is why on the rest of this session, I want to share with you how you can help people stay safe and secure online and provide effective trainings to people in your community. So we recently launched a toolkit to help equip security professionals with resources and information on teaching others about online safety, and specifically using this to go out and volunteer in your community. So these resources include a video series. We recorded a series of videos with lots of great tips with Tracy Malif, who's also known on her blog as the InfoSec Sherpa. We have a tip sheet, just kind of an overview of some of the items we'll run through in a moment on how to give an effective presentation. And we also have 4 PowerPoint presentations that we've already drafted for you for 4 different audiences. One is just general for the general public. One is for older adults, potentially to give at, in a retirement community or a senior center. We have one for elementary school students and another for high school students. So, elementary school and high school, maybe there's opportunities to talk to, go to your kid's school and talk about cybersecurity, or going to a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout meeting, talking to teens in some way at an after school program. So we understand that it's hard to do these kinds of presentations and it's hard to jump right in. So we wanted to make sure you're as equipped as possible with these full presentations. You can see what they look like here. And they also, every slide includes speaker's notes. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can take the notes, you can, completely edit them, change things around, use them however you like. So if you're interested in going out, giving a presentation like this to your community, here are a few tips to help you prepare. We recommend reaching out early to leaders in your community to pitch your presentation. If you want to give a talk during, say, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, probably good to start planning for next year. Consider reaching out even multiple months in advance. A lot of community groups like librarians, club leaders, school administrators plan events very early. So you want to consider their schedules and be courteous of their planning. I think it's important to focus your attention on a specific audience. Picking an audience can help you focus your presentation, can help you give an idea of like how to craft your message. If you have some kid in high school, maybe you want to focus your presentation on what would be relevant to teenagers, focusing on social media, staying safe online on social media. Or maybe you want to focus on talking to older adults in a senior center or retirement community, focus on the, what might be most relevant to them and the technology that they might use. I think getting an understanding of the technical knowledge of your audience is very important. You can talk to community leaders of these clubs or organizations that you're working with to schedule your presentation, to understand about, who your audience is, how they might use technology in their everyday lives. So again, if you're speaking to a retirement home, your talk should be different than if you're speaking to first graders. These people use, different forms of technology. So also just keeping in mind to have patients as well. A lot of these groups are maybe understaffed, under-resourced, might not have the chance to respond. It might not work out with scheduling, but there are a number of different places you can go to give these talks, like schools, religious groups, for example, if you're part of your, your church or different religious institutions, libraries, retirement homes, Girl Scout and Boy Scout troops. Maybe there's a way to help your daughter's Girl Scout troop get their cybersecurity badge. Community centers, summer camps, and all this, keeping in mind, if you can't find that place to go volunteer, this is very, very relevant in your workplace as well. I think a lot of, security professionals do need to talk to employees and staff about staying secure online. And so all of these tips and resources are relevant to that as well. So, with our toolkit, we talked about you don't have to start from scratch. And remember, find resources out there. You don't have to do this alone. There are so many great resources out there about online safety, articles, blogs, talking to, the general public, to different very niche audiences about online safety. So find resources and use that to help build your talking points. And I'll share some of these resources in a bit. So when it comes to your presentation, we like to recommend just some of the things we talked about before: avoiding jargon, keeping it simple, kind of like the way we're talking about these tips for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Start out by introducing yourself. Explain to your audience why you're there, who you are, what is your background, and why are you qualified to share this information? Why should they trust you, really? Maybe start out by describing cybersecurity and connecting it to some things that they may have already heard about. We talk a lot in our talks about mentioning the Colonial Pipeline attack, because that's something that was mentioned in mainstream news. A lot of people have heard of it, but maybe when they saw it, they didn't quite connect it to some of these cybersecurity practices that they need to start adopting. So I think tying it in makes people realize, like, oh, this is happening. This is important. Again, vocabulary matters, and using jargon causes people to tune out the talk. Maybe there's ways to explain certain terms, like multi-factor authentication is one that people are probably going to start to come across if they, turn on multi-factor authentication. So provide those definitions, but, remember that it's not about giving, a vocabulary lesson or definitions. It's not about teaching people the different terms for phishing. It's about teaching people how to recognize a phishing attempt, for example. And we recommend starting with basic cybersecurity hygiene. It doesn't hurt to go over the basics like passwords, password managers, multi-factor authentication. We hear about these things a lot, but not everybody has. So I recommend starting with this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month topics. We have a number of resources on each of those. So we also recommend sharing those resources in your presentation. Share websites, share handouts, books, give people resources they need to continue to learn after your presentation. So make sure they know what's available to them, especially who they should contact if they are if something happens to them, if they're the victim of a cybersecurity attack. Your job is to give them some education and then leave them with resources, tips, and contacts for them to use on their own to continue to learn about cybersecurity. And again, feel it out, before your presentation. It's great to talk to the community leader. They know the audience best. Talk about what the audience's concerns or fears might be. Maybe in the middle of your presentation, don't be afraid to change it up a bit. If you're talking about cloud security and it seems like people really aren't interested, maybe, pivot or ask people questions about what's most important to them. I think that Q&A is really important. People have a lot of questions about how to use their devices, how to install these things. So I think it's great to have that, Q&A element in there, let that guide your presentation, and then creating, takeaways and follow-up information. And if you're able to, having giveaways, everybody likes free stuff. Like it could be as simple as if you're able to get some pens from your organization to give out, even something as small as that, like bring some swag from tech conferences if you can, that gets people excited. And considering follow-up too, follow-up or don't. Be clear with your audience about whether or not you will act as a resource or contact for them following the presentation. But, this is something that takes your time. We know you have full-time jobs, so don't be, afraid to, if you don't want to be that resource for your community, it does take a lot of time and energy. You don't have to give away your contact information at the end. Just make sure you leave them with, groups that they can contact, maybe government agencies or other nonprofits, or point them towards the National Cybersecurity Alliance if they have, any additional questions. So for connecting with your audience, as we discussed earlier, we really stress using empowerment when educating others. You might have heard the acronym FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. These three things are terrible motivators. They don't typically lead to behavior change. Instead, focusing on these simple, empowering, friendly tips and language is incredibly effective. Again, that includes staying away from jargon and acronyms, keeping your talk informational and informative as well without being condescending. People are there to learn. They're not stupid. They're just, they don't have cybersecurity degrees, provide, don't be afraid to provide more in-depth explanations as needed, but remember that people are concerned about cybersecurity. People want to keep themselves safe online, but there's so much information out there. It can be overwhelming, especially, when you just hear about these attacks and hacks happening on the news. You see the creepy photos of the hacker in the hoodie. It's very intimidating, and it's hard to know where to go for, just those simple steps and correct information. So using empowerment, answer questions, or, maybe take questions from the audience ahead of time before the presentation, so you're prepared to answer them during the presentation. Making it relevant as well, focusing on what's most important to your audience, maybe relating it to technology that they may have worked with in the past, technology that they work with a lot now. It's okay to, to adjust to, and, to follow up as well. Maybe if you don't have an answer for someone during the presentation, you can, look for that later and get it to the community leader to hand out to your audience. So even if you don't plan on volunteering in your community quite yet, there are still pieces of this that can help you in your own organization if you're teaching others, coworkers, employees, staff about cybersecurity, or trying to get them to adopt a specific behavior. We know a lot of people during Cybersecurity Awareness Month like to host events and trainings. And I think a lot of the tips we just covered apply to that as well. When we're talking to employees and staff, we're all members of the general public. A lot of people have different roles and responsibilities. They don't have time to think about, online safety at work all the time. So, it's using that, simplicity, empowerment, being informative is really helpful in those settings as well. So we have a few additional tips if you end up, hosting an event or training in your organization. Again, identifying your audience and having a focus as well, knowing the behavior you want to change or influence. What are you trying to achieve from your presentation? Maybe you really want employees to install the company VPN. Make that the focus of your presentation instead of trying to cover everything. Align with what is most important to your organization as well, but don't be afraid to get creative, keeping it lighthearted, fun, relatable, interactive, using humor, as long as, it's appropriate in the setting. I think, again, a lot of people hear about cybersecurity in these very scary ways, and it is a serious topic, but that doesn't mean we can't make it, light and use humor. If you create a positive environment that welcomes interactions and leaves time for questions, you'll see a lot more engaged listeners. You can consider engaging your audience with a live poll or trivia. Again, having giveaways too, really, really fun for people, giving out prizes to participants for performing well on quizzes or asking questions. Again, it can just be something small. I know people that like to give out like little toys from the dollar store, like plastic fish for recognizing a phishing attempt. Like that stuff is a lot of fun and creates a lot of engagement. It doesn't need to be expensive to get people excited. And if this is a presentation at work, make it relatable for employees as well by tying the topic into their personal life, into their home or family life, or maybe to their specific role within the organization, teaching them how, some of these habits that they adopt at work can help them secure their network at home and keep their family safe, or something that they can teach to their children. And, I think in your organization especially, it is important to reach out afterwards, thank people for coming, send any follow-up links or takeaways or resources that you covered during the event. Also, considering speakers as well, if you're able to, showing buy-in from your C-suite, if you can get your CISO or a senior level executive to participate, really shows that your organization takes cybersecurity seriously. And this is, really something people have to pay attention to. Or you can invite an outside speaker. Bringing in a new face and perspective is a great way to re-engage your employees, especially, if they're used to hearing from the same speaker over and over again. The National Cybersecurity Alliance has speakers available year-round for presentations. You can also reach out to CISA as well. They have a number of speakers and regional speakers as well that can even come to in-person events and trainings. So just on these next slides are a few examples of what we talk about when we're covering the basics with an audience who might not be familiar with them. And this is just kind of another starting point for if you want to take a look at some of this, maybe start to fill it out with your own advice if you're interested in giving a talk within your organization, or if you're interested in volunteering when you're with your community. And certainly we're not telling you to only focus on these things. If there's something else that resonates with you, if there's another behavior or something you want to focus on, like by all means, like go for it. There are a ton of resources out there on different topics, but for example, we focus heavily on multi-factor authentication, and we start with the very basic, making sure we're, level setting. What is it? Why is it important? How does it work? What does it look like? What type of accounts enable multi-factor authentication? Anytime you might have time to do like a little tutorial or training on how to set it up on a certain platform is incredibly helpful. And just some additional data from our research to back that up. 43% of participants we surveyed had never heard of multi-factor authentication. However, out of the 57% of participants who had heard about it, 79% applied it at least once, and 94% of them reported they were still using MFA, which is really exciting for us because it showed that when people install multi-factor authentication, they don't generally uninstall it. It's not, too much of a burden that they get rid of it. So people install MFA and they continue to use it. Talking about using strong passwords and password managers, we cover what makes a strong password, what is a password manager, and why use a password manager, and dispelling some of the myths around password managers as well, and guiding people towards choosing one that might be right for them. We asked people in our survey about the typical length of their passwords. 46% say their passwords are typically between 9 to 11 characters. A lot of people said 7 to 8 characters as well. And as an organization, we recommend passwords be over 12 characters in length. So something that's potentially you could focus on in your presentation is creating, long, complex, unique passwords. We did ask if people use different passwords for their important online accounts like email and social media. 33% said all the time. This one was a little more across the board. Some people seem to, but those are numbers we can definitely try to bump up. We asked people about their preferred method of remembering multiple passwords. And the most popular answer was that they write them down in a notebook. We are trying to, focus on password manager applications. I think, once you set it up, it certainly takes a lot less time than writing it down in a notebook. And, something could happen to that notebook if it's for work purposes and you leave it by your computer. Certainly not a great method, but we understand that people are skeptical about password managers. 37% that say that they don't trust any single provider with managing all of their passwords. So this is where we try to give people additional resources. We tell them, talking through, some of the incidents they might have heard about password managers, the types of security and encryption and zero knowledge architecture that's in place to protect their data, and also pointing them to additional resources. We tell them to go to buyer's guides like CNET, PC Magazine to read up about password managers, trying to find one that's trustworthy, to do their own research and pick one that's right for them. Talk about updating software, why it's important, when to update, how to set automatic updates, and avoiding fake notifications for software updates. Because we have found that 35% of people presume their devices are automatically secure, and 25% admitted to clicking the remind me later button a few times, which I feel like seems a little low. I think a lot of us are guilty of clicking the remind me later button. But there are a majority of participants say they always or very often install the latest software updates, and 62% of participants reported having turned on automatic updates. And talking about phishing, of course, how to spot a phish, not just in email, but text, phone calls, direct messages, what to do if you spot a phish. I think this is a question that a lot of people have, how to report it. At what point is your information compromised? Like, what happens if you accidentally type in your credit card information and give it to a scammer? And how to report it as well is incredibly important, giving those people the resources to know what to do in case something happens. People are generally very confident in their ability to recognize a phishing email or a malicious link, which is really great. But we want to emphasize that, a vast majority of breaches do start with a phish. So these, they've gotten so much more complicated, hard to recognize, and phishing emails can still get past our defenses, even with education. So again, just making sure people have all the information they need to do the best they can to recognize a phish and to know what to do if they spot one. 70% of people we surveyed very often or always check for phishing before clicking any links or responding. And 72% sometimes, very often, or always reach out to a person to verify a message that seems unusual. So when we talk to members of the general public, we tell them, it's not weird to reach out and give someone a call to see if they actually sent a message. In fact, a lot of people do it. 58% of people we surveyed said that they're better at recognizing phishing messages because of training, which was really great to see and shows just how effective training can be. However, 34% of Gen Zers reported having lost data or money due to phishing. So that's a third of the Gen Z respondents that we surveyed. So maybe that's a good group to focus on, maybe going to, high school class, a college club, stressing that we tend to think of older adults as, falling victim to these scams all the time, but it is certainly a problem in younger generations. And I'll leave you with just a few additional resources, links to about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, where to download our volunteer toolkit and watch our video series. We also have a number of educational videos and webinars on our YouTube page, which we have some fun trainings as well in our security awareness series. You're welcome to take those and use those in your own presentations as well. In fact, our security awareness episodes are also available to download directly onto your computer from our website. And CISA.gov has a number of resources on Cybersecurity Awareness Month on different online safety tips. Again, I highly recommend going out looking at different resources to help you build your presentation and having different resources to share with your audience as well. So thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to take any questions, but if you'd like to learn more, our contact information is on the screen. We're staysafeonline.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn for cybersecurity tips, upcoming programs, more information about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and feel free to contact us as well. Our email is info@staysafeonline.org. You can reach out to me directly. My email is jennifer@staysafeonline.org. So feel free to send us any questions or comments.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for that wonderful presentation. We did get a few questions, so I want to first start with the one, which is, how long should a presentation be for educating people? Do you find it like an hour is too long, or depends on the audience?
I think that's something you could talk to a community leader about. I like to err on the side of being too short rather than too long. Our attention spans are short. Maybe you do half an hour, and if people are really engaged and have more questions, you can leave time for Q&A at the end, or you can come back for a follow-up presentation. So I think it depends on what you want to talk about. If you just want to focus on one specific topic, maybe keeping it shorter, and again, having time for Q&A.
And then when it comes to like a presentation, should one try to do a workshop or a presentation such as like something that you just did right now? Mm-hmm. Do you think it'd be better to have something that's like hands-on, or maybe showcasing how to use a password manager to showcase how easy it could be?
I think doing something hands-on is incredibly effective. I think, especially if you're in person, if you're able to, maybe it's a smaller group and you're able to work with people more one-on-one to show them how to set up a password manager or multi-factor authentication. I think if you're speaking to a big audience, that's a little harder to do. Maybe you, have slides, but anytime you can do a workshop, we know it takes a lot of, time to kind of prepare those, but hands-on experiences are so effective.
Yeah. So another question that I have on this one. So I always run into the situation of trying to promote like a password manager, mm-hmm. but then there are people that are so skeptical, like you shared earlier, about using a password manager, because it's like, well, if someone gets into it, then they have all my passwords. So it's smarter to just write it on a piece of paper. What are some ways or practices or phrases that one can practice as a security professional to try to convince people why like a password manager is important when you're using like MFA?
Yeah, so I have gotten that question before too, people being very skeptical. And I do try to couple it with enabling MFA. So telling people, like, even if someone does get your password, like, it'll be okay if you have MFA enabled, they still won't be able to get in. I do point out specific incidents, like there have been password managers that have experienced breaches, and I think people hear about that and that's how they become skeptical. But I believe that there's never been, customer data or information that has been compromised in those breaches. So without trying to get too technical, explaining to people that there are, things in place to protect their information, and having a really great long, unique complex master password on their password manager is incredibly effective at, preventing anyone from getting in.
So one of the questions that we got is, what are your thoughts on passphrases or auto-generated random passwords? Should they be used or avoided?
So passphrases, I think it's great. We tell people generally our advice is to have, passwords that are over 12 characters, using different special characters, upper, lowercase letters, spaces. So we tell them, maybe think of like a quote or a song title, something, and, play around with the characters a bit. So thinking of it, as a passphrase is great. And then what was the second part of that question?
It was should they be used or avoided when it comes to like auto-generated random passwords?
So we typically recommend it. I think we, talk about that as a benefit of using a password manager, how they'll probably be better at coming up with a, random secure password than you are. It can be hard to think of, a unique long password every single time. And you can also set on a lot of password managers them to come up with, passwords that have a certain complexity or a certain number of characters. So we do recommend that.
So what happens when people are trying to educate others, but the people in the room are kind of have a security apathy going on? What are some tips that you would have, or a big tip to help people try to address that situation? Because I know some people, what they've done is they'll share their personal experience of, when they had security apathy or when they reuse the same password and then what happened to them. Is there any other suggestions that you have on that front?
Yeah, I think it's connecting cybersecurity, like talking about cybersecurity as a security and a safety issue. I think it resonates more when, people understand the basics of like, protecting their physical security. So maybe drawing the comparison to, just as you would, lock your door at night to protect yourself physically, so much of our lives are online now, and it's important to, lock your virtual doors and protect yourself online as well. And it gets tough because, you don't want to scare people, but you do want to be honest about, what can happen, social security numbers being compromised, the money you could lose, just the, headache of being a victim of identity theft. These are real problems that people face. So, being honest about what could happen and just making it relatable to your everyday life. Maybe they don't really care about it for themselves, but they probably have loved ones, parents or kids where, they would hate to see something like this happen to them. So trying to relate it to, as a way to protect your family and your friends.
And then another question I would have on this front is that when you're trying to, I guess, convince, I would say people that are on social media quite often, because I've had a lot of calls where people will contact me like, Chloe, my account has been breached. I can't get into my account anymore. And then I ask them, did you share your password with someone? Do you have MFA on? And then I find out that someone basically kind of pretended to be Instagram, for example. It sends them an email saying, we've noticed some unusual activity in your account, and give us a call at this number and we'll fix it. And so what happens is the person falls for this attack and basically asks for their password. And then if they have an MFA, but through text message, they will provide the code over the phone. And then now this person has complete access to their account. And I see this happening so much, but frequently for women in particular. And I was wondering if you have any advice when it comes to people that are brand new to not social media, but to cybersecurity, but also use social media. What are some best practices that they should follow? Additionally, what should they tell others of their friends, especially those ones that are like, oh, I only need to do 10 characters, 10 characters complex. It's totally fine. It's safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to make it relatable, I think we've all gotten like, that message on Instagram or a text from someone with promoting a diet pill, like something that they clearly wouldn't promote, and something's happened. And so I think it's maybe telling people that like you don't want that to happen to your account either. Like this is how you prevent that embarrassing moment of like, knowing that you just like a message has been sent to all of your followers and all of your friends. Like it's embarrassing. You don't want that to happen. I think it's important, especially when talking about social media, if this is something that you're passionate in educating others about, talking to teenagers, to kids from a very young age, like instilling these behaviors early, how to recognize a fish, how to be skeptical of, what you click on the internet, or providing information to people. Try to make it fun, make it relatable, telling people like, who wants to call someone on the phone anyway? Like not a lot of Gen Zers or millennials do. So like, don't call the number in the email, go to the website to verify it. Like, I think also telling people like just to do one thing to like keep themselves secure, like telling people like if your Instagram account got taken over, like, and that would cause you to have a really bad day, then just start by like enabling multi-factor authentication on that account, or making sure that you have a really secure password, like just starting with one thing and then like going from there, and not trying to make it too overwhelming where you have to check every single account. It's like, start with the ones that are most important.
And then don't click on anything like if you're not awake. Like it's like you need your cup of coffee or your tea before you start your day. Like that's like the one thing. If you ever want to get someone to click on a link, you do it, you send it at early hours or late at night, and people will click on it. And to be honest, even the top professionals in our field, they fall for phishing attacks too.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter how smart you are, like even if you know a ton about, security, like it can happen to anyone. And I think for social media too, I mean, we talk a lot about like teenagers, but it's important for everyone. We all scroll through social media and we don't usually stop and think about it. We just keep going and going and going. It's hard to stop and think about what you're about to click on and, where you're about to go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here with us today and giving us this wonderful conversation starter for many of us in this industry. Because we're always wondering, like, how can I help? Well, just contact your local school district or, senior centers. There's just these little things. Just ask if you can volunteer or at least give a talk, breaking down like the top 4 that we're trying to promote this month through National Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Yeah, and I'll just end with one thing, if you're worried about, apathy or, getting across to your audience, like don't be afraid to talk to your audience. Ask them like, if you're not doing anything, like, why don't you like cybersecurity? Why aren't you doing this? Like we did in our survey, asking about those barriers, I think can really help you craft an effective presentation. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we'll see you in our next segment, which will be featuring around neurodivergent in the space of cybersecurity and what you can do better to provide inclusion with Melwood. All right, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.